When and how exactly should you interrupt somebody on a video call? Hi guys, my name is Deepak Shukla, founder at the Pearl Lemon Group. We're a business growth and development agency based in the UK, USA, as well as serving clients worldwide. And here today, in day number 47, we're talking about ultimately how to interrupt a client on a call when you know what you take a change the trajectory of the call. So if you are struggling with or need some support with anything that relates to communication, whether it's within your team or with your clients, please do just reach out to us. And before we get into this communications training, feel free to click the link in the description below to get access to 7 additional strategies that are not shared in this training. So look, fundamentally, when you're on a call with a client, if you interrupt, there's a couple of things that I think become important. The interruption needs to be a meaningful one. Okay, so when I say meaningful one, the interruption needs to relate to ultimately what your client is saying, or rather what they're about to say, in a manner that's going to change the trajectory of the call, because that's a meaningful reason to interrupt. So you got to have a good reason to interrupt. Okay, that's just the first thing that underpins it. Okay, have a good reason to interrupt. There's lots of variations for what good reasons to interrupt are. If someone says that the reports are crap, but they've not seen the last report. If someone says you didn't send me an email, and that's a more challenging one, because interrupting them to say, well, actually I did, is potentially reactionary, but it might be important in instances where it can change the nature of them talking about generally how your performance has been from a communications perspective. If, for example, someone says, so I was looking at the SEO reports, and you need to interrupt to say the reports now live somewhere else, that might not be a reason to interrupt. But really, it's on a case by case basis. So we're just talking about when to interrupt from perhaps a tactical perspective. So interrupt when there's natural pauses. Interrupt when your client takes. So let me just write this out, because I'm going to the reality is, in terms of, like, let's say, when, according to what's happening in the conversation, it's a bit complicated. But when there's a natural pause, to when your client takes a breath, 3, when your client changes subject, 4, when you're being blamed, 5, when the client is getting emotional and doesn't have all of the correct. So let's just go through these kind of one by one. So when there's an actual pause, like that, if you heard that, so I said when there's an actual pause, I paused and then I said like that. So I'm going to so look out for that in what I'm about to say. So next week, what we're going to be discussing is Frankenstein. So there you go, guys. That's when there's an actual pause. Now we're going to be when a client takes a breath. So absolutely, Deepak, as you can see from what I'm saying, that's a mini breath. As you can see from what I'm saying, I think that the biggest problem now, breaths are a little more difficult to spot, because when people are typically talking, then, I mean, you heard it then when I said when people are typically talking, breath, then, but they're not as pronounced potentially as natural pauses, because people can pause for effect. People do typically pause for example, dramatic effect, as well as to breathing. So every every pause can typically contain a breath, but there's much fewer breaths that are for pauses. So in every pause, you'll typically find a breath, but in every breath, there might not be a big pause. So just a bit more subtle, a bit more contracted. That's the other one. Now, when your client changes subject, and if you need to say something in relation to the subject before they change it, that's a good reason to kind of interrupt. So we're talking about the whens. When you're being blamed, Deepak, I'm really unhappy because this report that you sent over is just frankly hogwash. I mean, why did you, Frank, sorry, did you not get the latest report? So there you go, guys. That's an example when you're being blamed. So I say when your client changes subject, when you're being blamed, and when the client's just getting emotional and without the correct information. Deepak, I'm frustrated for the 10th time. It feels like I'm telling you guys, why can't you just, Frank, we did it this time, Frank. So there you have it, guys. That focuses on the whens. That focuses on the whens at a very specific tactical level. Now let's talk about the hows. Look, the interesting thing with the hows is an interruption is an interruption. So I mean, a couple of examples practically. Yeah, so that kind of yeah, is useful. Also, putting your finger up just to show that you want to kind of step in, I think is useful also. So the act of literally stepping into the gap or stepping into the conversation. So that would be, leaning in slightly with your video on and holding your hand up and bringing your hand in a little bit as if you were inserting yourself into the conversation. That would be a couple of hows. And also being apologetic for the interruption, I think, is going to help. So let's just write these out. So we've got 6, which is the how is, so guttural guttural murmur, lean in with your finger, and apologize. So apologizing for interrupting makes any rudeness the client might perceive about the actual interruption dissipate a little bit. So Frank, apologies for interrupting. Frank, if I may, and Frank, if I so, and then also repeating their name. Now, repeating their name is also quite a smart tactic. Deepak, if I could, because it gives someone to cognitively understand that you got a point to make beyond them just feeling, why is this guy interrupting me? So bloody rude. And when you say Deepak, I'd love to. So repeating their name or repeating the first parts of the sentence gives the client time to stop their speech, understand that you're not interrupting them for interrupting's sake, and that because you're being so reasonable with the interruption, you might have something reasonable to say. So, do you see all of the psychology involved in what I've just said? That if you're just able to say, Frank, if I may, apologies for interrupting. I think you'll want to hear this. So when you repeat their name, when you start with a little bit of a purposeful stutter, then because it feels so reasonable, the client can ultimately feel that, well, maybe what he's going to say is going to be reasonable as well. So starting with let's call it a micro stutter, is also going to help. So there you have it, guys. Pretty black and white strategies for when to interrupt your client and then how to interrupt your client. So there you have it. This is when and how to interrupt someone on a video call. And if you're enjoying these videos, please do subscribe. I'd really appreciate it, and leave any comments about learnings from this or any other takeaways you've got in the comments below. Thank you so much.